I'm Jenny Radelet, producer of The Treatment. Another bonus episode courtesy of the Film Independent at LACMA film series. The following conversation between Elvis Mitchell and Paul Thomas Anderson was recorded live at LACMA's Bing Theater. It followed a double feature of two war documentaries by John Huston, 1945's San Pietro and Let There Be Light from 1946. Anderson cites both films, which he found on YouTube, as highly influential during the making of his latest film, The Master, which is currently nominated for 3 Academy Awards.
So talk to me about the first time you saw Let There Be Light.
Well, like I said, it was on YouTube. And, I'd never seen anything quite like it. Just, I guess with the first film, which I think I watched at the same time, taking nothing away from it, but because it's a great film, but you've seen explosions off in the distance and the camera rattle. I was familiar with that stuff, and it had already kind of, it already maybe become desensitized to it in a sort of terrible way, but this was something, these close-ups of these fellas, and hearing them talk, and long takes, it was not battle footage, it was obviously the aftermath of the battles, and it was just no wonder they didn't want anybody to see it. And it was just a great, at the time, was writing The Master, and, you can only go so far when you get when you're trying to sort of get in the head of another time, and you sort of get hungry for more. Films of that period don't do it, but seeing a documentary from that period and something that's laid so bare was, I watched it again and again and again and again, and it was at a time and when I was writing it where I was feeling pretty good about what I had, but I just felt like something was missing, and suddenly you get lucky enough to kind of discover something, and it just kind of opens up for you maybe a story that you were working on, and that's what that did. Seeing Let There Be Light did for me.
Was it that sense because in that movie, unlike any John Huston movie, even unlike Under the Volcano, there's just a sense of these guys being completely lost in their own bodies.
Perfectly said, yeah. It's funny, too, to see this kind of happy ending put on it, which you could feel, I don't know. I know he had a rascally sense of humor, not that he was applying it to this film, but you could feel maybe he was saying, well, I just put a little swell of music and say that everything's okay, and maybe I can get away with it, as if and the War Department probably said there's no swell of music big enough, to make it okay what you've done. But the fella, the black guy, is talking about his wife, that letter. It just doesn't get any more harrowing, or so seeing somebody like that, so vulnerable and so naked, you just never saw that sort of fellas from that era that came back. You just never saw them kind of bearing their souls, and I'd never seen anything like that. So.
No, it's unique. I'm sorry, I forgot to say at this point. Please, no recording of this. We got lots of people with fully charged tasers who are ready to take each and every one of you out because they're really sadistic. But the thing about The Master that kind of applies, getting back to the conversation, what a segue. The thing that really I feel from Let There Be Light in The Master is that your movies before The Master, death was always kind of like something, kind of a specter in the background. But this is a movie that kind of starts with a guy recovering from being surrounded by death. And that really seems to have influenced the way The Master starts to me. Yeah,
for sure. I think, too, in a practical way, just for making that film, was like, you just ask yourself, are you gonna go shoot some war footage and stuff like that? And that's a real big investment, not only of time and effort and energy and money, but are you going to be able to do something that hasn't been shown before? Do you need to do that? But just for that film that you're talking about, just one look at Joaquin Phoenix, like when you look at these guys, just look at these faces, and you don't need anything else. That's the sort of thought that just occurred to me there. But I feel like the Battle of San Pietro, to me, the best part of that film, we're talking about this, yes, you have all this harrowing war stuff, but getting to the end and you see these faces when you just this kind of relief, and it's not a relief, but it's it's faces. It's not landscapes and explosions, as haunting as that is. But the second you see the faces, everything just comes rapidly into focus. And Let There Be Light is exclusively faces. There's no war footage at all. So,
and in those faces is all that kind of collateral damage from the battles.
Right.
Those starved kids with those lines under their eyes and those worry lines on their foreheads, and Let There Be Light. Those guys with just that pain in their faces.
Yeah, it's pain in their faces, but also too, just something that's great about the film is how they do talk about it. Because there was always this sort of it was the generation that wouldn't talk about it, and they kind of kept it all to themselves. And so, I guess that's true. But here, these guys were really pouring their heart out. And there's the interesting thing of sort of watching these guys try to mess around with all these different methods about how they might be able to help them or cure them, sodium pentothal and hypnosis and Rorschach tests and all that kind of stuff, which, I don't know, did it only make it worse, or did it help? I don't know.
It didn't seem to help, but the funny thing was that there's so much confidence in each of these treatments that didn't really seem to do anything.
Right.
And in watching The Master, I mean...
Well, I love the doctor, that kind of real nuts and bolts doctor, right? He's just like slapping him around, right? Just like a Tex Avery character is the doctor. It's like a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, and...
the only thing he doesn't say is snap out of it. I mean, that's the only thing that's missing from
that. He stops just short of saying snap out of it. But for that film, for The Master, there was obviously it helped feed into ideas that eventually got into L. Ron Hubbard's head in Dianetics, which is sort of how to work with mental illness. How to just work with the mind. That was the kind of thing that he got into, and I think he did spend time in naval hospitals. So he was obviously around all this kind of stuff. So whatever he was doing was not this entirely made-up thing. He was kind of around this stuff and funneling it into what he was working on. Yeah.
Because when he's when Philip is questioning Joaquin, it's almost that same kind of things as doctors. He's like really trying to sort of probe this soft spot because he understands that there's trauma. There's that admission of trauma, basically, in the conversations, and it's really like watching these interrogations in this.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of those things had been formed, in the script for The Master before I saw this, but it's that kind of lucky thing that it sort of helps verify maybe something that you've made up or you found somewhere else. It just helps you kind of feel like you're on the right path when I was seeing this stuff. And yeah, those kind of hard-hitting questions that kind of are meant to kind of break you down or get you to kind of to open up. Nothing entirely new. I mean, it's all kind of, psychology or psychosis, but sort of psychology bringing, yeah. I lost my train of thought. Yeah.
Actually, I have a couple other questions. It's okay. Because in that sequence especially, have a little something. That'll help the toddy. There you go. I like when you're a little woozy on stage. And then I own you. Now you're Joaquin Phoenix. The cutting in that section reminds me of John Huston's cutting. I mean, what I was saying before, that where he said basically an edit came when naturally you would blink. And that kind of sort of cast iron cutting, this is the cut, this is the cut, this is a cut, really is in that sequence. I mean,
I'd never heard that he said that before, but
yeah.
That's great and makes sense to me. I think I respond to his films just how nuts and bolts they are. They're really kind of lean, mean fighting machines, and whatever it is, it floats my boat about it. I like that about his films. Love it, actually, and yeah. Treasure Sierra Madre I talked a lot about. It was a big influence when There Will Be Blood, and that was a kind of beginning of a real hardcore obsession with his stuff and feeling like just so muscular. But in addition to not just muscular in that, John Ford was muscular too, and he had a sort of sentimental side. But I think John Huston was a great writer too. That was always I respond to. His writing as well. Not really known as a writer, but his adaptions of books and things like that.
Oh, sure, because what he does that I find myself thinking about with your stuff is there are always these kinds of questions of masculinity, except in his movies those questions were always answered. And your movies, those questions basically aren't.
Well, he was more of a man than I'll ever be, I suppose.
I don't know. I remember you telling me about the steak and tequila diet when you were cutting There Will Be Blood. That sounds very John Huston to me.
That was steak and vodka. Yeah, the connections end there. I mean, he's, listen. I do live in the same neighborhood, though. He built a house out where I live, and it's still there, actually. Great house, and he built it, and they ended up shooting Red Badge of Courage, and on the sort of backyard out where I live. It's now populated by a lot of houses and stuff, but yeah, so.
Did you read Picture, the Lillian Ross book on?
I did.
Isn't that great?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Because it's just one of the rare sort of looks into how entirely decisive he was. I mean, if you read that and White Hunter, Black Heart,
right,
you get a real sense of that thing. He always knew what he was going to do, and no matter what the cost.
Yeah. And probably many times against what was better for him. I mean, he didn't. Which translates into the films better or worse, really nuts and bolts, attack, and just a kind of streamline of vision. I don't think there was a lot of kind of poetic thinking or kind of hemming and hawing that went on, and yeah. But he was also, I don't know, I don't want to sort of say that it's all just nuts and bolts with him too, because he was such a painter, and he probably was a romantic at heart, and you can feel those kinds of things coming through in his films too. I think just because you make a film that's as cut and dry as Let There Be Light is, it would be wrong to assume that he sort of was sort of cold, sort of a cold person. If anything, it's the opposite. I mean, he was nuts and bolts in the filmmaking to allow what was happening in front of him to do the talking. It wasn't filmmaking getting in the way. He was such a humanist that I think this idea of blinking when you cut probably is based on, well, let them tell the truth. I'm not going to tell the truth by or make my own truth by kind of cutting it up a bunch of different ways. I'm going to let what's happening speak for itself.
Did you like that, though, that precision in the cutting in that sequence, that question and answer sequence? Because that felt so new to me for you, that kind of just let's get on with this kind of thing.
Well, I have to admit that that's probably just a function of being able to shoot with two cameras at the same time. So you can, literally on a computer these days, just press when you feel it. It's like less like in the old days. You'd have to get two cameras and you have a big long scene. You're just, to get everybody matching and get rhythms right and everything else. And that's kind of which he did not have here. I don't know how they did. They must have had two cameras. I don't know. That's just a lazy thing. You can press a button and it's terrible.
I mean, expose your laziness to this audience here. This is awful.
It's more of a feeling, So it's like, when do you want us to look somewhere else,
But it felt like that to me, especially just seeing that stuff and just also watching The Maltese Falcon again. Mm-hmm. Which really has that, and is at this incredible momentum, and there's a kind of something I don't often think of in your films, a real kind of narrative momentum in that particular scene, because usually it's sort of like playing out in terms of character, but it feels like it's building towards something like a real climax at the end of that sequence.
Right. That's just yeah. I mean,
was it on the page?
No, it was on the page. You're talking about when they're asking questions back and forth. I mean, there's an inherent thing, though, in that, and then it is a cliffhanger. You're sort of, we're going to, and that's just luck of the draw to get a scene that can work like that, can actually work as a suspense scene and work as this dynamic interplay. But at the same time, you're learning something about this person, this character. So these kinds of ideas of screenwriting, plot and momentum and character and usually the worst scenes that you have to go do in a movie are the ones that will move the story forward. You got to stop for a second and somebody has to kind of say some really horrible dialogue about, well, the reactor, will blow up if we don't have, whatever it is. But they're necessary because you gotta keep, and it's like you just scratch your head the day that you have to shoot those. Like, how can we get this off without seeming like completely ridiculous? But a scene like the one you're talking about was just sort of, you can get you get lucky that everything's happening at once. You're learning new information, and you're on the edge of your seat, and you want to find out more. And yeah, well, I won't get another one like that in a long time. And that's just like it worked out in our favor.
Yeah, because it felt again so unique for a movie of yours to do something like that, because the information is generally something that we have to learn over the course of the movie.
Right. Yeah. I mean, usually, yeah, exactly. Exactly. If you sort of want to find out what the story is with somebody's mother or father, that's a whole thing, But if you sit down with a Q&A, you can fire questions.
I'm going to keep that in mind for this.
For every question.
Because one the thing with
So I should do it without blinking, kind of thing.
Or blink and I'll ask the next question.
Okay.
See, it'll work like that. But a movie we talked about since I've known you, and I've been talking to you now since Boogie Nights, is Baraka has always come up in terms of influence, and just kind of like the languorous quality at the beginning, where there are longer cuts in The Master and in so many of the other movies. And I mentioned this to you after I'd seen Boogie Nights, and you went, yeah, Baraka is a movie that means a lot to me. Talk about the first time you saw Baraka and how that really kind of moved you.
God, I don't even remember the first time I saw it. It must have been on DVD. I think on DVD. And I just loved it. I mean, I loved Corey Nastosky. I like in general movies that are just pictures and music or something like that, and that Baraka just kind of really did it for me. And then I saw it in the theater, and that's a whole other experience. And it's always stuck with me. And I will, anytime I get a chance to kind of drag somebody to it, I will do it, or I just go on about it, boring people. But and The Master, I showed Joaquin and I were always talking about apes and animals and things like that for his character in that film, and I showed him the first shot of Baraka. I don't know if anybody's seen it, it's going to be boring, but there's a great shot of him. Good, all right. I remember the first shot, it's a monkey in the snow, and he's falling asleep. It only must take like 2 minutes, just to stare at this monkey slowly falling asleep, and it is absolutely hypnotizing. One of the best things I've ever seen, and I showed it to him one day, and I said, and he just loved it too. I said, let's try and do that. So.
Yeah, because when I talked to him, he said that by the end of the movie, you were calling him, your pet monkey. And what trick are you going to ask him to do today?
Bubbles, Michael Jackson's monkey. Yeah, it felt like that. It felt like having a trained monkey that would. No, really. I mean, well, I think it fit. That was probably one of the ideas in the film. Whether we'd really talked about it or not. But what happened? It's like Siegfried and Roy. Like, what happens if you have a tiger in Chris Rock's word that goes tiger? It went tiger. I think there was discussions about that kind of thing, about having an animal, having a monkey, and putting diapers on it. And what's eventually going to happen is that it's not going to like its little hat and its diapers. It's going to bite you. It's going to get mad. It doesn't like it. And no matter how much it, flips over and does. It's not exactly like the frog in that cartoon that sings. Remember the
Michigan J. Frog? He's not doing the
right.
Michigan rag?
The Michigan rag, right. But it's more of when Bubbles, who went f***ing crazy,
No, please go.
Yeah, no, you can't. Come on, you can't put monkey on diapers on a monkey.
I hadn't thought about being the lesson of The Master until just now, but it clears a lot of the movie up for him. But when he told me that, it's weird because the way he moves physically, even when he's wearing a suit, like that sequence when he's working as a photographer in the store, is completely wrong for him, being in that environment and having to and he's moving around, prowling the room, looking for prey basically, or something to do.
I mean, it just speaks, it's just if you can imagine, the sequel to this film, like what happens when that this is over and now you're set loose and you have to go get a job. Questions arise like, what the are you supposed to do with your life? How are you supposed to get on with it? How are you supposed to manage a day-to-day existence? And one thing that I talked about with Joaquin, which relates to this kind of stuff, is that not only was there trauma that these guys had come back with, but having a sense of a master or a commander that you respected and that you liked, who you could look up to, and a sense of schedule in your life.
Discipline. Something to do.
Discipline, exactly, was what suddenly, like, the rug was pulled out from underneath you, and you were expected to kind of make your way without that, and that alone was difficult. Not to discount all the kind of images that might be floating around in your head from what you've seen and what you've gone through. But that kind of structure and that kind of discipline that can be so helpful to people's lives, was missing. So,
because we're talking about this, and I know Tati and Blake Edwards, and one of the things that those guys have in common, and as I was watching The Master too, I felt a little bit of the Days of Wine and Roses, a bit of it, just that sense of wanting to be told what to do with your life and not knowing where to go.
I don't know that film that well. I know Blake Edwards stuff so well, and I don't know that film very well.
It's the most dramatic of all the films, and
Right.
you got Jack Lemmon, who's essentially like comedian,
Right.
basically playing out all these traumas, that sense of being lost. And I really felt that, I guess, watching The Master as much as anything else. And I know that for you, people trying to figure out what to do with loneliness is something, a recurrent theme in your work. And I wonder how you imagine that, working that into the Master so much, because it's really a big part of Freddie's that he's completely lonely.
Yeah, somebody. I guess he's somebody probably that is that considers that has probably moved through most of his life alone, or sort of learned to survive alone. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't completely hunger or desire to be around people or to be part of something. But like, back to the bubbles thing again. But the second he feels too much goodwill in the room is probably the moment he's going to split. It's probably sort of that much love and attention is probably worth bailing on for somebody like him, which is it doesn't make any sense, but it does. For anybody that knows that feeling.
Sure. But loneliness, I sort of feel like the last section of There Will Be Blood is Clearview's kind of going crazy with loneliness to some extent. And the way that loneliness kind of warps people. You think about the beginning of Sydney, Hard Eight, he's the guy who's made this agreement with loneliness, but these kids don't know what to do. And that idea of the way you make your peace with loneliness or you can't deal with it runs through a lot of your work.
Yeah, it's like, it's like if you've ever taken a vacation alone, you sort of, I don't know, you get a few days away from your family or something, and sort of like the first 15 minutes you're thrilled, but 17 minutes later you're lonely again, you're sad. And I think people like to be with other people, don't they? Mostly, don't we all like being together? Mostly.
I don't know. Do we? Mostly, kind of?
I don't know. But then again, we like to split. I don't know. I'm vamping. I don't know. Loneliness? I don't know. Elvis? I don't know.
I don't mean to watch your movies to ask you these questions. I won't do this again. I know now. But it's that kind of hunger, I think, often to be around people. You think about, Mark in Boogie Nights, and, he's really desperate to sort of not be a lonely character. And I kind of feel like I can see this kind of weird arc from going from him to Adam in Punch Drunk Love, and now to Joaquin in this. These guys who had to figure out a way to deal with this. And these are guys who, and these other two guys, Adam and Mark, can be social. But watching this movie, I kind of felt a little bit about the way that Paul Schrader described Travis Bickle, this guy who's alone, coming back from the war, who's had this regimented life, where he was probably at his happiest when he was told what to do every hour of the day and told how to socialize, all these things you're talking about.
Got a really nice email the other day from this great filmmaker, Tatja Rosenthal. I haven't talked to her in a while. She does stop-motion animation. She sent me this really nice note, and she said, I was so happy that your movie had a happy ending, talking about The Master, that it had a happy ending, that Freddie ended up where he belonged, naked and being an animal, someone else. I thought, I was so great. It really touched me. It made me, it made me feel like, so this talk about lonely, yes, of course, he's got a lot of things wrong with him, but that kind of feeling that I don't know what will happen with him or how it'll go for him, but it was nice to see him in his element, completely naked and f***ing.
No, and often for you, when you're working, there's like a piece of literature, there's a book that you use as kind of like a foundation. Was there something like that for the master?
Just lots of Dianetic stuff that I was getting into. There's a great book called Pacific War Diary. You know this one? I mean, you weren't supposed to write on ships, and I'm going to get his name wrong. James Fahey, I think, or yeah, Fahey. Anyway, he had the most detailed diary that he kept and that he stored away, and that was published, I don't know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And, you know, it was the talk about the best way to kind of really, you know, try as hard as you could to kind of understand what it might have been like on those ships. There it is, day in and day out. That was really helpful. Couldn't get enough of that stuff. And other than that's kind of the main stuff. And that was the main book in terms of Freddie's character, really. A lot of stuff from John Steinbeck's biography that was written. Stole a lot of stuff from that. Just kind of talking about like loneliness. Not that Steinbeck was a lonely guy, but I think he had a period in his life after he left college where he was kind of aimless, and he kind of wanted to be Jack London, but that didn't really work out exactly right, and he worked on various farms, and he worked in a department store.
And a cannery.
And a cannery, yeah. So that stuff was really helpful. Trying to think of anything else. Everything else is a couple of, Dianetics-related stuff.
The movie has this interesting schism between sort of like the past and the present, where in the past you're supposed to know what to do with your life, and everybody Freddie's surrounded with is kind of an adult, and to some ways you almost wonder if he's kind of imagining these people to be more adult than they actually are, because it's all from his point of view.
That's good, yeah. Isn't it all? That's always the way. Isn't it always the way? You always imagine that somebody's more adult than you are. Somebody's got it all figured out and you don't. Somebody, you know, and they don't. You know, yeah.
Because those scenes we see with that
I never thought of it that way, but absolutely, yeah.
Because scenes we see that are not from his point of view, you can see that, you know, Philip just basically doesn't know what to do with himself. And his wife, that's a great scene with Amy, when she's basically saying, this is who you are and this is what you're going to do, goddammit.
Right.
I mean, it's really amazing to see those people not from Freddie's point of view, to see that they aren't what they think he is.
Right. No, you said it better than I can. And that's not something that I thought of, but there it is, and I think that's true. You always, you sort of always peer around the corner and wonder if somebody's believing in something that maybe they might have it all figured out, and maybe they do. I don't, I'll always be thinking somebody's got it more figured out than I do, for sure.
Really?
Oh, sure. Yeah, and then you go over to their house, and it's like smells kind of like cat piss or something. And, you're like, I knew they were weird,
Well, I'm not sure if it smells like cat piss in that house, but when he's in that great sequence when he's basically imagining all these women naked and there's a piano playing, that's sort of like. That's one of the greatest things you've ever done, just getting inside his head in that way. And if you looked at that guy sitting there, that's the last thing you would have thought was on his mind.
What I liked the most about that, thank you for saying that about it, I liked what I thought, it's not really there, what I liked was that here's a person who seemingly could drink anybody under the table and, drink anything and still be standing. And here he is, crumbled into the corner, with somebody who's absolutely met his match, who, at the point when he's sinking and passed out, this guy's just getting started. It was that's what was my favorite part about that. Besides all the women and all that, was just like, he's still going. The master can out party Freddie. That was.
But And there's something very Steinbeckian about that too. There's all that thing in Steinbeck about these guys basically seeing who can outdo somebody.
Yeah.
And one guy semi-passed out with one eye open, watching these things going on around him. In fact, it's even that biography of Steinbeck that's there.
Yeah. But it's also kind of a John Ford thing to have somebody to stop and start singing and dancing in a movie. It was just like every John Ford movie. I can't remember what director it was. It might have been Frank Capra. Somebody was saying something about John Ford, and he said, Ford. When he doesn't know what to do, he just casts really long shadows or have people start singing and dancing. And now that I've said this to you, it's going to get in your head every time you see a John Ford movie. You're like, there's those shadows. Why are they singing? Everybody's dancing. And then he gets back to the plot again.
No, they sing and dance, and there's a fight.
There's a fight. Yeah, preferably all at the same time with long shadows. Yeah.
Yes, it's the Searchers. I mean, you can now name all these movies. Somebody gets these basic. You feel like you're at an Irish wake at those sequences. Somebody's.
Right.
They sing, they dance, they fight, then they pass out, then they wake up and apologize.
Right. Yeah, the master singing and dancing stuff is, kind of comes from just kind of having a character that's like the life of the party. Somebody who is not going to be happy unless everything is just jam-packed and full. He's just, I think we all know people like that. There was a lot of kind of talk and discussions about what doesn't need to be in the movie. That was always the discussion, and having screenings where, just amongst us, where we were just eliminating stuff and seeing if we could do without it. Trying it without the naked girls dancing, trying it without Amy jerking him off. I mean, you go down, you try, the comfort of an editing room should be about seeing what film you're making and seeing what you can do without. It was not really ever. It's not any fun to go in there knowing exactly what you're meant to put in and go and do it. That would be dull. This was like really kind of fun to just sort of mess around with the film and see what we wanted to do. Really, that was what that was. Whatever he saw was probably just some incarnation along the path of making the film.
Talk to me about the decision to shoot in 70, because it's to go from looking at that perfect sort of Academy box, that 133 of those documentaries,
right,
to that size frame.
Well, we tried to keep the frame smaller than normal on 70 mil, which is meant to be 2:1. So we boxed it in. So we made it 1.85, which.
But there's more headroom than normally is on 1.85.
A little bit more headroom, and less width. And that idea was, because the stuff that I was this kind of stuff, was Let There Be Light and films of that period, which somehow everything just felt a little bit more intimate. And I knew we were making a movie that was like a lot of, closed, in not wide open spaces. It was closed rooms and stuff, and you could maybe do shots where you had somebody head to toe and in a room, and it seemed to fit, more than anything, more than any real justification was just a kind of like, it works. That seems right. Let's do it that way. And that goes for shooting it in 70 millimeter too. I can't. It was like half-baked ideas about how to make the film or what format to shoot it in, and they were all just half-baked ideas. And we started shooting tests at Panavision, and we're hoping we would see something that felt right, where he just looked at it and you said, "That's good. That's what it should be." And with those cameras, that's what it turned out to be.
Did you like 70? I mean, just immediately?
Yeah.
I mean, because there's just a kind of a power in that frame that you just don't get.
It's true. I love it. It was great. Great. And long may it wave. I mean, I think hopefully people will use it more often, and hopefully more theaters will continue to bring back or at least save their projectors, and it would be great to have it around, I mean, it doesn't seem to me, I mean, I know what these video projectors, the size of them, you don't have to throw a 70 millimeter projector away in the garbage to make room for a digital projector. You can keep them both. There's no, it's like, it's like making room for a lawn chair for a projectionist or something. It's like there's enough room up there for everything.
Well, I think after tonight, we're definitely not going to throw our projectors away. But
I know you won't.
But I think, though, it's what I liked about this, because I was expecting like a classic 70 millimeter frame, and it wasn't that. It's almost like you sort of reconceived it this way you're saying, because it's kind of 133, but it's not. It's a lot taller.
Right. We thought we were real clever, and we thought, oh my God, I think we're the first people to ever do this. And then we realized like Jacques Tati had done it on a film that I saw, that I loved, Playtime. So anytime you think you're cool,
He did it for like the shoot got those long boulevards, though, and you're doing it for a very different thing.
Well, yeah, but that's the same reason. You did it because you needed to do it, and it seemed right. It's the same reason, you know.
Yeah, because but I can't like. For some reason, 70 millimeter seems to be the perfect frame size for Philip Seymour Hoffman. I don't know why that is, but he seems to be made for it as an actor. You know what I mean?
Is that a compliment? That's true. It's true. It's true. You know what? That should be a. Like a poster, or they would have done that in the old days.
Absolutely,
you know,
like certain actors who of a certain sort of size as actors in terms of what they throw off need a kind of frame like that.
It's funny because I was just, I tried to walk around the Kubrick exhibit for a second beforehand, and they've got a great still of Charles Laughton from Spartacus, and I know Phil doesn't really know Charles Laughton's stuff very well. He just doesn't. But they remind me of each other in their kind of. And not only their hamminess, which can be so great, but but don't think that that's just what they do. They can do everything, and that kind of skill as a comedian, as an act, as everything, and just absolutely watchable. And talking about needing 70 millimeters to film them, I think Charles Laughton was the same way. I just feel that way. Some actors are like that, Some actors just you wouldn't think Phil Hoffman the way would be. A great person to fill a movie screen, but to me, he is. Yeah, I'm glad you feel the same.
Yeah, because I hadn't thought that until I saw it. I thought, God, of course, this is exactly it. Because I think I saw the movie maybe a month after I saw him doing Death of a Salesman, and it's like, yeah, that's what this is. Because there's that side. So it's also like the way he uses the voice. I mean, and again, the character he's playing is somebody who's completely confident in his voice, and you often cast people who love to speak, and they think back to Tom Cruise in Magnolia, or even to some extent Burt Reynolds in Boogie Nights. These guys will know exactly what to do with their voice every time they speak. You really love guys like that, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. They're easy to write. They can, once you start, getting them to talk like that, you have to stop yourself from writing that kind of stuff and put a discipline on it. Because those are like, the way that Phil talks in this movie, it's also, aristocratic, and I don't know what it is, but
it's fake it's fake aristocratic though, and he gets this enormous amount of pleasure from throwing it on someone like Freddie who doesn't know the difference. I mean, you might as well be talking to the King of England. And it's really wonderful watching that exchange. It's a way that so many of these guys in these movies, even Sidney and Hard 8, they measure their power by the way people react to the way they speak.
Sure.
And they hypnotize people with their voices.
Well, probably that's my dad used to talk like that. My dad had a great voice, and he would just talk like a normal guy to you and everything else, and everything was going great. And the minute you f***ed up, this register would completely change, and everything, the way... You did
the Andrew Anderson on you when you got mad?
Everything would get a little bit deeper, and you would say, and you would shape up like, okay, the voice just went down a few octaves.
So he didn't talk like that normally. That was like his stage voice, basically.
Yeah, for sure. He had a deep voice to begin with, but but he didn't. He didn't say,
tonight on the Love Boat at the house.
He would go to Denny's and say 2 eggs, hash browns, and toast. Old joke, a terrible joke.
I'm going to let you go, but let's thank Paul Thomas Anderson for coming to share tonight with us. Thank you so much.